My next guest I had the privilege to sit down with is a 55-year-old Black gay trans man who enjoys discovering plant-based restaurants, weightlifting, theater, and traveling with his husband. Within this episode, we talked about what led him to be a guest on Dem Bois Podcast and how he learned about Dem Bois Podcast. We also discussed being an elder. We talked about his career, and we also talked about death and preparation for death as a trans person of color and what can you do to prepare for that? So I hope that you enjoy.
Dem Bois, Dem Bois, amplifying trans men and color voices. Yeah, we here making noise, making noise. Visibility equals possibility. You know we them boys, them boys, amplifying trans men and color voices. Yeah, we here making noise.
Welcome to Dem Bois Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his. My next guest is a 55-year-old Black gay trans man who began to socially transition in 2009 and medically in 2012. He enjoys discovering plant-based restaurants, weightlifting, theater, and traveling with his husband. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to have you here. And so you want to tell guests, just introduce yourself and who you are and pronouns.
My name is Patrick, he, him, his. I'm 55 years old, live in the Pacific Northwest. I'm originally from outside of Philadelphia, and I've been here about 12 years. Family is all on the East Coast. I live here with my husband, and don't have any. I have some family in the California, a little bit in Seattle, but otherwise most of my family is on the East Coast. I'm a funeral director, and that's kind of a little nutshell.
Funeral director. I definitely want to touch on that a little bit later in the show. It's definitely something
Okay.
I've never spoken to someone that's a funeral director. I'm pretty intrigued to get into that piece of your life. And so I want to ask you, how did you learn about Dem Bois Podcast?
So I found out about Stealth Trans Man, the Trans Masculine podcast, and then they did an interview with you. And so I had recently discovered their podcast and was really enjoying it, and just sort of a lot of relatable stories, and then learned about your podcast. And I was like, oh man, what is this? And so just dove into your, past episodes, and just clicked a lot more with, even more so with my experiences. And so it's like reached out to you just to say like, hey, I really like your show. And, it would be, if you were interested, I'd love to chat with you.
Yeah, definitely. So for folks that don't know, Stealth of Trans Masculine Podcast is a podcast that captures the stories of trans mass elders who transitioned before or around 2000. And so my episode on the show was before your episode aired. And so, so for folks who want to hear your episode on that podcast, the link will be in the description. And so I want to ask you, how important did you feel it was to come here on this show and share your story?
I think, living here in the Pacific Northwest, there's just, when I first moved here, it was being from the East Coast. I got here and I was like, man, there's something different. They're like, what's going on here? I'm like, well, where the heck are all the Black people? It's not a very diverse area. And so kind of the point of that is just sort of being a Black trans man. I think it's important to have our stories out there, and so people know that we do exist, and share that with people kind of coming along, and successfully transitioning, having a job, having a family. I think it's important just for that visibility to put that out there for folks.
Yes, definitely. Because I always say visibility equals possibility. And when you don't see folks and you don't know that what's possible for your own life. And so I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you decided to come on the show and share your story with our listeners. It's very important as trans men of color for our voices to be heard and for us to tell our own stories. I find that is very important. And so I like to ask my guests, before I dive into like who you are and your transition journey, how did the name Patrick, how did that choose you?
So it's similar to my birth name. And for, I went round and round with like trying to come up with some creative name. I went back and forth and I was like, you know what? I always liked Patrick. I always wished that was my name. I never asked my parents if that was going to be my name. My name was Patricia, when I was born. And so I never asked my parents if that was going to be my name, but I always liked it. And I remember when my nephew was born and his middle name is Patrick, and I was so jealous. I was like, "Oh, I want that name. I really like that name." And so my middle name is the same as my dad's middle name. So I took that. So not very creative per se in picking a name, but that is a name that always spoke to me, kind of growing up. And for a long time, people called me Pat, and I believe my birth name is my mom had a cousin named Pat, and so but nobody ever called me Pat growing up. But yeah, I think that's where Patricia came from. But again, I always that name just called to me, so I was like, okay, this is easy. And on the other part of that, because it's part of my former name, I thought that would be a little bit easier for my family to sort of transition. And so initially I was going by Pat, but I really hated that name, because I would always think of that show, the Saturday Night Live skit with androgynous Pat. And it just would, I was just like, oh, I don't like this name. But I thought, like, I really was worried that my family wouldn't get on board if I went with a completely different name. And so thought that this would at least be a little bit easier.
So by you choosing Patrick, was it easier for them when you began the transition, or did it even make a difference?
I would say with my mom, initially, I don't think it made a difference. I mean, I'm 12 years post medical transition, and my mom still messes up my pronouns. She's pretty much the only one I'll give a pass to. But she still messes up my pronouns, but it's easier for her now that she's getting older. I'm doing a lot of helping with her care, like from a distance, but talking to providers and such. And it's a little easier for her now to at least say Pat. Sometimes she'll say Patrick, but at least that now. But before she wasn't so on board, so she just was adamant she wasn't going to cooperate anyway. But I guess along that line, my mom, I have relatives who have changed their name for religious purposes, and she doesn't go with that either. I have a cousin, and she's like, oh, that's Larry. I just know him by Larry. And I'm like, Mom, the guy's like 60 years old. He's gone by this other name for years, and the woman does not like change. So
Wow. So if you don't mind, what is your middle name?
my middle name is Chandler.
Chandler. I like that. Patrick Chandler. That's a beautiful name, actually. I love
Well,
that.
thank you.
So how did your father, or do you have a relationship with your father? I should ask that first.
I do, yeah.
Okay. And so how did he feel about you taking his middle name?
I mean, just transition period. I mean, when I was an out lesbian, my dad was just on board. I mean, I always did stuff with my dad. He never questioned it. He was like, okay, I played a lot of sports, a lot of softball and stuff. My dad would come to the games and hang out and chit chat with my friends. And so it wasn't a huge leap for him. And so he got right on board, pretty quickly. I mean, my dad's 90, so he occasionally makes a mistake. I see them maybe once every 3 or 4 months. But in all this time, he pretty much from the beginning was right with it. And, he lives at a retirement community. And, when people are like, oh, who's this? And he's like, oh, this is my son, Patrick. Like he doesn't skip a beat. So it's always baffles me when, people say, oh, older people can't get on with it. But my dad right away, and my mom she's just stubborn. But yeah, he has had no problems. My siblings, my older siblings, you know, got right on board. My younger sister continues to she likes to hide behind her religion, and so that's what she will. She'll take that to the grave. That it's, she will not. She refuses to get the pronouns right. She won't call me her brother. She'll say she makes it more complicated. Like she'll call me her sibling. I'm like, fine, whatever. But she is a part of a church that is pretty right wing, and she just will not get on board.
When I'm looking at you, and obviously, like we have that privilege to pass, right? And so
Hmm.
I think about when someone's not wanting to honor your pronouns, it's like, what do you see? You know what I mean? It's like, obviously, physically, you don't see me. I can get it that you know me. And obviously, I was going to say, you know my heart, but you don't know my heart because if I've transitioned, I've changed.
Hmm.
But I remember as my grandfather was getting old, I didn't want to correct him either. And I just
Hmm.
felt like, he's in his 80s. There's no point of me, harping on that. I just want to enjoy him at the end of his life. But it was a funny story when he was in a hospital and I went to see him
Hmm.
on Christmas. I believe it was Thanksgiving. Excuse me, it was Thanksgiving. And it was my partner at the time was in the room with me. And I was standing there and the nurse walked in and he was like, "Oh, that's my granddaughter." And she looked at me. She's like, "It ain't no damn way. That's a granddaughter." And so she looked at my partner and was like, "Oh," because he was like, "That's my granddaughter. She's beautiful, right?" And she was like, "Oh, yeah, she's pretty." And I was like, "Yeah." So I always think of it like when people look at us and then somebody gets our pronouns wrong, it's obviously on them, right? We
Yep.
take it to heart because we know our truths, right? But then somebody on the outside that don't have no idea who we are, they just looking like, is this person confused? Like they
Right. And that's
mistaken.
come out where my mom is at this point in life. I'm like, look, they're gonna think you're crazy, lady. So you can not get on board. And so she's so funny because she will get it right in public now, but then when we're back in the apartment, then then suddenly she can't get it right. And I was like, oh, you get it right when it's convenient for you to not look crazy. But,
Right. Not wanting to look crazy in front of people. But I guess, and also in our, when we think about safety, that's the best way to do it on the
yeah,
outside because we don't know who's there's trans folks that getting murdered all the time. Right. And so we think about practicing our safety, even when we're going to restrooms, regardless if we're passing or not, it's a safety issue.
for sure. Yep.
So I asked you this before we began recording because I want to respect you and asking if it's okay if I call you an elder. But you transitioned many years ago and you're 55. And so when was it in your life when you had a sense of who you were, your gender identity?
It was pretty late for me. So I mean, really, really had a sense probably in my late 30s, because I transitioned when I was 43. Um, so it was kind of like late 30s, but then now when I look back, sort of things like, yeah, I was always a tomboy, as a lesbian, was masculine presenting. And it sort of made sense now. And it's now it's like I didn't now I realize like, I don't know what it is. There's this weirdness of like the time that I spent as a lesbian. Like I'm okay with that. That's who I am. That was a part of my history. But it's so I was so in that middle road for so long and I hated it. I hated, the bathroom thing where, you'd go to the bathroom and people would constantly yell at you. And then, I'd spend so much time correcting people like, no, I'm a woman. But then, other times when there are other times when I would just go with it and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. All right. They don't know the difference. Um, so it was a lot of back and forth, but when I look back, I think like the signs were there and I just didn't know it. I just didn't have language for it. Um, and I mean, gosh, and you look at, and I don't, there's nothing I regret about, my life and the experiences that I have. But, I kind of look now at like the resources and the language that's out there now. And I was like, man, what if I would have done this so much sooner? How would life have gone? But there were signs for a long time. I mean, I can think back to some stuff even in kindergarten, that I was just like, okay, that probably makes sense. But my parents never, I wasn't buying my clothes as a kid. And if you look at my school pictures from after about third grade, maybe when my mom was continually to put me in dresses, you look at all the pictures after that, and I mean, at least up to high school when I was buying my own clothes, like, I was very masculine presenting, and they were buying the clothes. So I mean, they were letting me kind of be me. But then as I got older, then my mom, it was like prom time or whatever, she was always trying to like make me wear these outfits that I absolutely hated. And it's just like, I'm so uncomfortable in this. But for most of I mean, they let me be me, growing up.
And so them letting you be you, it's kind of strange how they let you be you. And it's like there's no sense of who, as a parent of who your child is going to be. And I think also for parents, they don't have the language either. And they don't
Right.
understand it, right? And then that's not like they're in a support group for parents with gender diverse children or anything like that, right? And so, especially, coming from a different generation, the only thing that really was important when you had kids was feeding them, clothing them, sending them to school, and that's it, providing for them, right? There was
Right,
no
right.
no room for extra stuff, right? And so I think
Sure.
that's kind of like the older generations is like, I did my part, I raised you, and that other
Yeah.
stuff I don't really care about. It's sad, but just
Right. You
knowing,
stayed out of trouble, and
right,
then we did that I did my job.
right, let's do the basic stuff. The new Visibility Equals Possibility merch is now here. If you've been a listener of the show for a while, you know that here on Dem Bois Podcast, we believe that visibility equals possibility. And I say it all the time. Now we're introducing a groundbreaking collaboration crafted by Emilio. Emilio was featured on Dem Bois Podcast episode 37. So if you don't know his story or his journey, be sure to go back and listen to episode 37, right? But this isn't just merch, it's a movement. We're empowering trans men of color with creative freedom to design their interpretation of what visibility equals possibility means to them. Think of it like major brands collaborating with athletes and musicians, right? But this time, it's our community taking the center stage. It's great to have trans men of color designing products that represents their community, my community, your community, and that folks feel proud to put on. So be sure to go to the website and check it out. Our website is dembois.org. That's DEMBOIS.org. Every purchase goes to support our vital programs. It's kind of sad though, because I feel like as a parent, you're missing out on everything that your child is. And as a parent, the one thing and most important thing to do is to raise a good individual, right? And that's it, right?
Right.
What they do, what a child does with their life moving forward is at the end of the day, you're raising a person, is what I should say. And whatever you choose to do as an adult, I did the best I can do. Go out and be prosperous in life, right? And do what it is that you need for you. I want to ask you, you mentioned being uncomfortable as being a lesbian in a part. What did you mean by that?
Not so much at that time per se. It's now. It's sort of when I see lesbians now, it's like I see that person almost that was hiding all that time. And there's just this discomfort in me of like who I was at the time. And I was just like, who was I fooling? What was I doing? I can't even describe it. I was like, man, I probably need therapy over this, but it's like I cannot figure out what it is, but there's just this discomfort of who I was all that time. And that this is who I should have been. And like I just didn't know. And I can't put my finger on it, but there's just this when I see, in the beginning of my transition, that was my community. So I'm sure people have experienced you start to lose that community and you don't know who you connect with because now you're in this middle ground of like, I'm as a gay man, like I wanted to sort of go and go to gay bars and hang out with gay guys, but I was in that middle ground but I only knew this lesbian community. So when I moved here and when I started transitioning, I was passing, but like I felt like nobody saw me, because you wanted to see like the lesbian girl was like, whoa, they're having an event. Let me go check that out. And you go there, and I'm sure people are looking at you like, why is this dude here? Like, what's going on? And then when I'd go into a gay male space, like it was still so new to me, I didn't know how to act. So it was just sort of this lonely middle road there for a while of like, where am I supposed to go? Who do I hang out with? And so like that was my community. I was a big athlete. Played a lot of sports, lesbian team sports. But now I don't know what it is. I'll see somebody, I know they're lesbian, and there's a part of me that wants to connect. There's a part of me that's like, that was me for so long and I didn't fit in and I shouldn't have been there per se. I don't know if it makes any sense, but I don't regret that time. But just there's this internal thing that I guess I haven't dealt with of like, all that time when maybe I did know but didn't know and didn't have language to figure out what was going on with me.
I asked a previous guest this question about identifying as a lesbian, and I'll answer it as well. But is there a part of you in at times that you actually miss that identity?
No, I don't think so. I think for me, I always had this attraction to gay men. And, I would kind of joke about it and say, well, because I was a lesbian and like kind of pre coming out as a lesbian, I had been with men. Then as a lesbian, like not again, because I thought there was these very tight borders of how you were supposed to act. But I always had this attraction to gay men and more masculine presenting women. But I felt like in the Black community, when I would go to any of those spaces, I felt like I didn't fit in because I was definitely not sort of this butch femme. I didn't do those roles, and I dated a couple people who expected me to be in those roles, and I was like, "This isn't no." Like, and they were like, "You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to do this," and I was just like, "You have way too many rules of how I'm supposed to act." Um, and this isn't how that. This isn't me. So I don't know that I miss it. I miss a little bit of the camaraderie of some of those sports and things that I had done. So I don't miss it, but I miss some of and I guess an example of that is, no, that's not really a lesbian thing, but I played college basketball, and I've connected with some of those people, have done stuff with them, but when I was just home on the East Coast, I'm never home for any of those events. I was just home on the East Coast, and my coach, they were naming the basketball court after her. So it was actually both of the coaches that were there when I was there. They were naming the court after both of them. So it's this big event. I just happened to be on the East Coast for vacation, and I thought about going, but at the same time, I was like, I don't fit in that space. And so I went round and round for probably 3 months. My husband was like, "Will you just make a decision? Whatever you want to do, just do it." But I went round and round about, am I going to go? Am I not going to go? And my biggest thing was like when it was going to be time to take pictures, like I was going to be this awkward person standing there with all the women because that's who I played with. And people are going to think like, why is that guy in the wrong picture? Like, why is he there? And so that was sort of my thing. I was so caught up on that. And so I ended up not going. And there were a couple other reasons why I didn't go. But like I missed this. There were people that I hadn't seen in a long time and I really wanted to see. But then at the same time, I just couldn't get past, like, I was just like, it's going to look so out of place for me to be in any of those pictures. So it didn't end up going. So, but I missed that. I missed that connection. But at the same time, I wouldn't say I miss, sort of that lesbian world that I was in.
When I answer that question, I do have moments when I actually miss it, only because I spent more time of my life at identifying as a lesbian than I've had identifying as anything else. And so I felt like that's what I know, and that was my level of comfort. That's where I knew the most people. That's where, I did a lot of my first club, my first party, my first performance on stage, right? Which is really big in the lesbian and gay community sometimes, of that stage performance and just like those people. And so I lost a lot of relationships because I don't associate with that space anymore. So sometimes I have that missing of, damn, I miss this person, or I miss doing these things with this group of people. But I also took a step back because once I began to transition and I began to pass a little bit more, I didn't want to be that masculine person taking up space. And so that was another aspect of it. But I really wish that you could have gone. Only I understand, and your feelings are valid about being out of place, but it's also that piece of visibility equals possibility, and just knowing that it could be somebody that was on your previous team that wish they could, transition to, and maybe and never had a face-to-face contact with somebody that they knew. Or it could be, yeah, I used to be on this team, I used to be this person, but now I'm this person, right? So it's that it is conversation provoking and thought provoking, right? Of like who people are and how we can change later on in life. We don't remain the same, right? Some people may have gained weight or lost weight, or, got married or had children or not, all of these things that people change and do things throughout life. And it's just showing that our transition is a part of life for some of us, and it shouldn't really be hidden. And we should be able to stand up and be proud of who we are in this moment and say, look, yeah. And I get it though, right? Because it brings up a lot of emotions and feelings, and you don't want to have to correct people all the damn time with your name and
tell the story. I mean, there are people that I have continued to have relationships with, including my coach. And I've seen them other times. There were some people just that came out of town that I hadn't seen, like two former roommates who I have a relationship with. We just haven't seen each other. So I was bummed about that. but then it's sort of like, it was just like these I went there in 87. So from 87 to, I think she retired in 2021 or so. So it's like that whole span of group. And there's a whole bunch of people I don't know. And so, yeah, I couldn't get past the awkward feeling. And I was like, I live my life proudly. I am who I am. I don't necessarily shout it all the time. I live a pretty non-disclosing life, but it's not that I'm ashamed of it. I was just like, I just couldn't deal with like, I was like, how's this going to go? Am I going to have to talk? And it was like, even the men's team, like I had a really close relationship with the men's team when I was there, and I had not maintained any relationships with any of them. So I was like, just all in my head of like, is this going to be awkward? And so I just didn't bother.
I want to say that not too many guests have been on the show that identified as gay trans men, and obviously, right, we're only 60 something, 70 something episodes in, but
Mhm.
so I don't have like a vast amount of people that showed up, right? So I want to say that not too many that I've had on the show identify as gay trans men. And so how did you make that switch where from your identity, right, going on about life, identifying as a lesbian, into saying, hey, wait a minute, I'm in this uncomfortable space? How did you go exploring or to explore your identity as a gay man?
I mean, kind of early on in the transition, I had gone to a conference in Atlanta, the Southern Comfort Conference, and I met some folks who were gay trans men, and for me, like I had said, I always had this sort of attraction and had no language for it, and then I was like, what? I meet these people that presenting that are gay trans men, and I was like, oh wow, like hadn't even, I don't, at no language, so it hadn't even occurred to me. And then I was like, oh, okay. So then kind of early in transition, it was just like, okay, let's start experimenting. So I'm like, I had some good and bad experiences on the apps. Not bad and safety bad, but just awkward bad. So I was kind of, when I moved out here, Portland, when I moved out here, I had friends that lived out here, and they're like, oh, it's so much more open out here. And there were a bunch of, several trans men out here, some groups and stuff. So I was starting to connect with people, but didn't really, so I was talking to some folks and was like, hey, I really want to try this bathhouse, but, how are they? At that point, I hadn't had top surgery. And so wasn't comfortable with kind of going into that kind of space. And so started playing around in the apps, and I was like, okay, I am not going to get myself into a situation where I suddenly have to be like, surprise, by the way, I'm trans. So I put it out there up front, and I was like, if they can read it, they can, then I can say it's out there. And so it's not a surprise. And I would have a lot of conversation beforehand, but then it was some awkwardness of like, I met guys that were like, I realized later were married and just kind of experimenting, or like would say, yes, I want to be with a guy. But then I felt like they were treating me almost like in a woman, in the way we were intimate. It seemed too binary. And then I was like, no, I'm not. And so, lots of experimentation. Until I, just trial and error figuring out. But I knew that that's what I was comfortable with that. Like I wanted to do that. I wanted to have relationships with men, but I knew I wasn't necessarily like, I was very clear on, I didn't want to be, for lack of a better word, like submissive in that binary type relationship. I didn't want them to see me as female in any way, shape, or form. And so just sort of navigating that was just lots of trial and error. I'm happy now to be married. I'm married to a cis man. Happy to be married and not having to navigate that. Although we are now starting to experiment a little bit with like going to some open forums where there's sort of play amongst people. And so we're just now started to experiment with that. And I've kind of gotten to this point now where as unconfident as I just see him talking about the basketball situation, like I'm more confident as a gay man presenting in spaces where clothes are not on, and feeling comfortable and just confident in who I am and how I present. I mean, there's definitely some dysphoria there now and then, but I'm a lot more comfortable than I was before.
You said it's a little dysphoria there. Where does the dysphoria come from? Like, what aspect of it are you relating to?
A little bit of body dysphoria, just in I have not had lower surgery, and so a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. And part of me is like, well, whatever, don't talk to me if you don't want to talk to me, or don't interact with me. But then there's other times where it's in my head just a little bit, but not anywhere like it, it's just a little bit in the back of my mind. Like I'm just like, well, or someone will just walk by and you're in a space where people are choosing, they're picking people that they want to interact with for 1,000 reasons. And sometimes in my mind, it'll be like, oh, they're not going to talk to me because I'm trans. But for the most part, I've been comfortable in those spaces. People have interacted with me in spaces, because we do a lot of gay bear type events. And so just comfortable just being in those spaces. I'm way more comfortable shirt off. Like whatever, I have scars, whatever. I'm out here and I'm way more comfortable with that. It's when there's no pants. It's when I sometimes have a little bit of get a little bit nervous.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, and I'm grateful for you. Thank you for your vulnerability and being honest in that fact, right? Because you didn't have to share that with us. And I want to say that I've actually spent some time in those spaces as well.
Okay.
And just recently, of just like exploring myself and my identity and like who I want to be with and who I don't want to be with, and sexually, romantically, whatever, right? And I literally just had an experience about a couple weeks ago. And I talked about it in my therapy session of that same dysphoria that you mentioned. It's like I can walk into this space. Yeah, it's a bathhouse. Yeah, you can clothes on or not, towel or not. I feel fine. If I'm up from the waist up, I also haven't had bottom surgery. That's just not a part of my gender journey. And so I choose that for me, right? And so it's that dysphoria of, will somebody want to interact with me if they know, right? Or having somebody say, it's a lot of touching and maybe grabbing, and somebody saying, hey, wait, do you tuck? And then like having to say, well, no, I don't. It's like, I don't want to have that conversation with you. So let's just go on about our day. You go your way. I'm not going to have this conversation, right?
Hey, this is Joel Simu, production assistant for Dem Bois Podcast. Here at Dem Bois, we are committed to amplifying the voices of trans men of color. We need your support to continue this important work. Your contributions make it possible for us to cover production costs, provide honorariums to our guests, and keep sharing these powerful transition stories. Ready to support? Click the donation link in our description or head over to our website at dembois.org. And remember, all donations are tax deductible. Through sharing, connecting, and giving, you're doing more than supporting a podcast. You're helping build a movement. Until next time, stay strong, stay visible, and keep telling your story.
And so I want to ask you, like, for somebody that's listening, what would be your advice to someone that's like, hey, Patrick, I'm thinking of the same space, the same thing. I don't necessarily feel comfortable in lesbian spaces, and I want to explore maybe with more masculine body folks, maybe cisgender men. Like, what would be your advice to someone who wants to take that step forward?
I mean, I know for me in the public space, my husband and I just went to this event, and you look at their policies and they say trans welcoming. It's a space for masculine presenting men, and they say, if you say you're a man, you're a man. We're not questioning, we're welcoming to everybody. And people have that in their policies, but I emailed them and I was like, hey, I want to know, have you had trans men here? What's been the experience? And the guy got back to me right away, and he was like, yes, we are very welcoming. We've had people in the past. He's like, it is in our policy. If you have any issues, let us know. So at least I wanted to hear from the organizers, and it wasn't like a delayed response. He got right back to me. And then ironically, at the end of the event, when we left, we ended up talking to him, and I was like, oh, hey, we emailed, and he was like, oh, how was your experience? And he's like, I hope it was great. I hope you come back. And so for me, like, to do a little bit of research, I mean, if you know people who have already gone, that's another route too. Like, if you're part of any trans groups, to kind of find out if anybody has gone. And that's what someone suggested to me about this event. I was like, well, I don't know anyone who's gone to it yet, but just trying to do a little bit of research, or even if you know people that you're comfortable with, whether they're trans or not, have they had an experience? Have you seen other trans people there? And then, it's just sort of dipping your toe in and going as far as you're comfortable. I mean, at some point you got to kind of jump in the deep end and sort of figure it out. Is this going to be for me, or how am I going to learn? I mean, I played around at, can't think of what they're called. They're basically the hookup places, like the bookstores. I went to a couple of those initially, and that was, it was just like, well, let me just try this and see how it goes. But yeah, besides talking to folks or just kind of trying things out, I mean, I live here in the Pacific Northwest. There's a lot of, seems to be a lot of just openness, with including trans folks. But like the bathhouse is one thing I haven't gone to, but I just met a guy from camp just told me we were at, it's a different kind of bathhouse, kind of like a sauna. And it was trans night. So we were there talking, and he started telling me that he had been to this bathhouse. He's like, they have a monthly trans night. I was like, oh, they do? And apparently they've had it for years, and I had no idea. So now kind of learning about that, and this place is definitely working toward being inclusive to everybody. And they have several nights of like, whether you're interested in men, whether you're interested in women, both, whatever, are non-binary, they have several nights that are now available. So it's a traditional gay male bathhouse, but now they've sort of opened up these different nights and have a policy across the board. Anybody can come anytime they want. But they have some more availability. So I think I have privilege of like being where I live and having those spaces that are there. I mean, I used to live in Alabama. I'm pretty sure there's probably not a space there that I would be comfortable going into unless I really knew some folks and really did some hard research.
Yeah, so I would like to say that your advice to folks is just to do some research and then just try it out.
Yeah.
Do your research and just go for it, right? Because you won't know unless you try it out.
You can say no when you can say yes, you can say no. You're in charge of your body.
Yes, it's very important. That's a very good message. You are in charge of your body. Yes, you are. And I sometimes like it's socialized as females at birth. Sometimes that the social construction is like, oh, you have to be, your body is for someone else's pleasure, right? And so I talk about that also in therapy. Like, no, you have the right to say no, even in the midst. Nah, that's all right. I'm cool. Stop. Right. And so that is your right, is your body, protect your body. So definitely do your research and also protect yourself. If you're out here.
And it's hard to not fall into like, oh, this person's interested. And then you, like you're saying, then you feel like you have to just accept whatever it is they want to do. And that's not you, it's like, it's your body. You don't have to accept just because the first person talked to you. You're like, oh, okay, I'm worried. I'm trans. This person is talking to me. Great. I just got to like full on just do whatever they want to do, or I'm not going to be accepted. And that's, again, you got to take care of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You need to get hurt, get sick, whatever, because you're not, taking care of yourself.
Absolutely. And I'm so happy for you that you found someone, at the end of your journey, right, that you love and care about, and you got married. And so I want to ask you to tell folks, like somebody out there listening, like, nah, nobody is, that's like kind of like the message, right? When we begin the transition of like, nobody's going to love you like that, right? What would be your advice to folks about finding love and to find someone to care for you and be gentle with your body and all of those things?
I was not a fan of the apps as well. However, that is how I met my husband. But I mean, I would much rather prefer, like, I don't drink. I mean, I go into bar spaces, but I'm not a drinker. As I'm getting older, my trans elder, like I'm not up for being out late either. So trying to find, for me, we do a lot of things. Just what do you have in common? Do you hike? Do you like to go out and dance? Do you like to, there's so many, try to find different groups. For me, that's kind of the direction I was leaning next. I was going to start like, well, I'm just going to like get on this sports team or do this and just, meet people organically through stuff that you like doing. because I was getting pretty frustrated with the apps. Right before I met my husband, I was kind of like ready. I had just got on this one app and had a couple okay interactions, couple crappy ones, and was just kind of like, I'm done with this. And then then we met and clicked. But my thing would be, because ultimately, what do you like to do for fun? So trying to meet people in those spaces of things you like to do. And I had lived alone for a long time, and so was pretty comfortable with doing stuff by myself. So it's like, just because you don't have a big group, like get out, meet people, and try to find people that have stuff in common, whether it's a partner or not. Like, at least for me, I was also always trying to make community, and trying to find people that like things that I like to do.
I love that. So finding somebody in the midst of doing something that you were already going to be doing anyway. And I agree. Some of those apps can be a bit raunchy. Yeah. So sometimes
fun to chat back and forth, but when it actually comes time to face, if somebody shows up, then you're like, you are not who you said you were at all.
Oh yeah, exactly. I do the look out the people. Oh my goodness, are you kidding me? I'm not here. So I want to focus on your career a bit. So you had 20 plus years in community-based brain injury rehabilitation, disability sports, and Paralympic movement. And you're now a funeral director and embalmer. And so that was a switch from doing physical therapy and things like that. So I want to just talk about your career a little bit, and maybe if you can talk about your past career or even what you're doing now as a funeral director.
So when I went right into brain injury, I was a therapeutic recreation specialist. So at a undergrad, so went right into brain injury, and I would say I've loved every job I've had, and was very rarely was it like 9 to 5. I hate this job so much. From college, was doing jobs that I love. After doing brain injury for a while, I guess around 1996 is when I learned about the Paralympics. I hadn't heard of those before. I had heard of Special Olympics. I hadn't heard of the Paralympics. So Paralympics, for anybody who doesn't know, is for people with physical disabilities. They are 2 weeks after the games are held, 2 weeks after the Olympics, same exact venues. So if anybody had Peacock, hopefully you got to see some Paralympics after the Olympic Games. But so I found out about them. And then we started to research that and decided to go back to school to get more involved in that movement and working with athletes with physical disabilities. And so then, I graduated from grad school and got a job in that. And I specifically went to grad school to do this specific thing. And so that was my focus. I was a athletic administration manager, sport management degree, but I focused in Paralympic sport. Like everything I did had to do with that. And so went to Alabama and got what I thought was my dream job, working for a place that was an Olympic and Paralympic training site. The fact that it was in Birmingham, Alabama, just confused me, because I was like, this place is so advanced, it should be in California or something like that. Like the fact that it's in Birmingham, Alabama. But I spent 8 years and loved it. Got to work with USA program. I worked with kids through elite athletes, so adults in doing recreation sport as well as elite sport. And so loved every minute of that. Got to go to 3 Paralympic games as part of the delegation, and worked with wheelchair basketball and wheelchair rugby. Loved every minute of it. Again, thought I was doing my dream job. And then I moved to England. I took a job with Great Britain wheelchair rugby, and was like, this is my dream job. Because my other job was like part-time Paralympic sport, part-time athletic director for this program that served youth through adults with physical disabilities. So it was doing both, but I really wanted to just do wheelchair rugby. And I was the team manager. So not a coach. I managed the team, did all their travel, equipment, training, stuff like that. So again, thought that was my dream job, and then kind of got burned out on that. My contract was coming to an end, and when I was in England. And so I was kind of like, okay, what do I want to do next? And funeral directing has been something that's been in the back of my mind for a long time. Growing up, there's a family-owned funeral home business where I grew up, and my family's pretty large. My parents have 10 and 11 siblings. So everybody in our family has gone through that funeral home. It's a Black-owned funeral home. And so I got to see them from like 5 years old on up, always watching them, and so impressed in how they interacted with the community. And like funeral directors sometimes have this stigma, like, ooh, the funeral director. And I thought they were so cool. They were so interactive with our family, and they weren't like this standoffish, like, dressed in black, very serious. Like they were funny and interacted with us, did some, came to some stuff that our families did outside of funerals. And so always watched them and admired them. And so I was like, I've always had an interest in this. I think I want to pursue this. So when I was leaving England, I started looking for schools and found a school out here in the Pacific Northwest. And was like, I had wanted to move somewhere else different anyway. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. So decided to go back to school and become a funeral director. And so I've now been 9 years. I think it's been 9 years that I've been a funeral director and an embalmer. And right now, I absolutely love that. I love working with the families and guiding them through the journey of dealing with death. And then I also love the preparation part of, getting the bodies ready for the service, if that's what people want. Like if people don't want embalming, I'm not one to be like, you got to embalm, you got to have this casket, I'm like, what do you want? What did your loved one want? So I love that part of like, if they want that person to see that last picture of their loved one, I love being able to prepare them and help them have that, if that's closure for them to have that last opportunity.
Hey, this is Jackal from Stealth, a Transmasculine podcast. Join me and my co-host Kai as we interviewed transmasculine elders about their experience growing into their authentic selves. The term stealth highlights two important facts. That one, for our generation, we were often told to hide our past and live an underground existence. And that due to that, our stories are very often overlooked. Throughout our lives, each of us has had to navigate issues of disclosure, which have impacted us in many ways. We also have a member section where you'll get to hear some amazing transmasculine history from Black jazz musicians to Mexican revolutionaries. We hope you join us for season 5 as we continue to emphasize that transmasculine folk have always been here and that we will continue to be here. Be sure to check out our website, transmasculinepodcast.com.
I feel like that takes a special kind of person. I'm listening to you describe it. I could not do that. I have a problem with, I've always had a problem with death since I was a child. And it's something I work through in therapy. That's one of my other topics in therapy, right? Mm-hmm. And I have a problem with something being alive and then all of a sudden not alive. So for instance, when I go fishing, I put the fish in the freezer. I can't eat it for a while because I have to disassociate it from me catching it being alive, and then now it's dead and now I have to consume it. I'm just not okay with that.
You can just be plant-based and not have to deal with that.
Like you. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. That was a bad example to use with you, actually. I should have chose another one. But for instance, another example, I had 2 parakeets. They both died. I was younger. I didn't know that you couldn't put the blanket all the way over the cage. So they died. I woke up in the morning. I freaked out. Oh my God. I'm not touching them because they're dead. So I just put in the hope the parakeets forgive me, but I took the whole cage out and it was like, I don't want any more birds. And I just threw the whole cage with the parakeets still dead inside the cage in the dumpster. So that takes a special kind of person, right? Because to witness someone after they transition and to prepare them for their family members to see them one last time, that takes a special kind of person. It does. And so how is that for you, right? Because obviously you go to work and you're not talking to people because the people that you're with are no longer here, physically here. So like, how do you prepare yourself?
I'm talking to them, but they're not talking back to me.
Let's hope they don't talk back to you because that's a whole nother episode. Do you really talk to them?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I spend a lot of time. I'm a workaholic. So there are 7 other directors that work we have one big giant office. And I am there early in the morning and late at night because it's just too much going on with the phones and everyone talking. And so I've spent a lot of time there by myself, and I prefer that. It's quiet. But I compartmentalize well. That's probably again a therapy thing I need to work on because I mean, I've dealt with family members' death. Like since I was 5, my parents drugged me to funerals, open casket, not by choice. And so I was used to that. But when I got into this, I didn't want to do the bodies. I just wanted to work with the families. But the school, you had to do both to finish the program. And then once you got done, you could do one or the other. And then I fell in love with working with the bodies. And some days I prefer to do that because again, they're not talking back. But I don't know how it will be when it's like immediate family. Like I've definitely dealt with aunts and uncles, even since being a funeral director. And I'm more like looking at it like a funeral director. I'm like, oh, how did they prepare that body? What'd they do? That's what I'm looking at. Like I'm not, but no one close to me has died since not super close, since I've been in the field. So, my parents are older and I know that's coming. I'm more prepared for it, I think, than my siblings are. Because I'm like, okay, they're older. They're having some health problems. Like this is going to happen. But I have a sister that my dad's 90. My sister is going to lose her mind when my dad dies. But so I'm prepared for that. If I had to care for them myself, I don't know if I could prepare my own parents. That part or cremate my own parents. Like I'm not sure about that. But I'm good at compartmentalizing because, I see kids all the way up to adults every day. And it just, I don't know. It does. Some of them sit with me. I mean, I definitely am sad when I see things that, are so tragic. I think I was just meeting with a family and I told them about some things we could do for the service. The guy was military. And something I brought up, like the whole room started crying. And then I started, like, I got teared up. So I definitely, I feel it, but I don't carry it, if that makes sense. At least I don't think so. And I try to make sure I work out regularly. Like kind of that's my therapy of like, if I don't get to the gym, I'm annoyed. And I need that. I need that for just my own time. But even preparing the bodies like that, at night, I'll do a lot of embalming at night when no one else is there. Like that's my time. It's quiet. I'm by myself. I love to like think through the process and be like, okay, they're presenting with this. How do I do this? What am I going to do? But it doesn't, I don't know. I don't have nightmares. I'm not afraid to be in the building by myself at night. Like it doesn't bother me. And like I said, I probably compartmentalize too much. And don't express feelings probably as well as I should, but it doesn't bother me. As far as like, oh, this job is really weighing on me. I don't think I could. There's definitely some weeks where it's because we're such a high volume funeral home that bothers me more. Just the constant stress of like, oh my God, did I forget this? Did I forget that? For each of the services that I have going on, that's more what I carry home. The stress of like, if I forgot something.
So being a funeral director and embalmer, you obviously see both sides of life, right? You work with the family who are physically here and living, and you're preparing the body of their loved ones who's no longer physically here. And so I want to ask you, like, to tie all of this together, right? Because we're trans men of color. We're living our lives. We're living authentic. Mm-hmm. When you see someone on that table before you prepare their body, it's just how important do you feel it is as we are living? We're 6 feet above. We haven't been cremated yet. We're 6 feet above living, walking, breathing human beings. Mm-hmm. How important is it to live in the moment and be exactly who you want to be while you have the opportunity?
I mean, I see how short life is every day. I mean, just some of the most random stuff that happens to people that, it's so, yeah. And that, I think sometimes that's when I'm like, oh, I feel like I transitioned when I was supposed to transition, but like, and now I'm like living my life and doing like, for the longest time, I kept trying to please my parents. And, I thought about not transitioning until my parents died. I mean, God, I'd be 55 at this point. My parents are still living. So I'd be like waiting all this time. I thought about everybody else and then I was like, no, I have to do this for me. And the same with, when my husband and I got married, like we wanted to go away and do something. And I knew my family wasn't gonna, unless it was in my family's backyard, they weren't coming. And so I was like, no, this is what I want to do. This is what I saved up to do. We're going to go do this destination wedding, and whoever comes. And no one in my family came, and I didn't expect them to, but I knew that going in. And I was just like, I'm at a point where like I've finally um gotten myself out of debt. I finally living my life the way I want to, and I'm just going to do it this way, and I'm really try hard not to conform for anybody else, because yeah, I mean, every day where my funeral home is, every day I go to work, something could happen to me because we're not in the best of neighborhoods. And I'm, like I said, I'm there late at night. So I'm like, every day I know that. So, I mean, I feel like it's, live your life. I mean, you got, yeah, there's an element of, you need to have responsibility. I'm not saying like, don't save, don't prepare, blow all your money because tomorrow is not promised. But I'm also saying like, live your life for you and not for other folks. But along that line, there's also being prepared. Like, this could happen. And for us as trans folk, queer folk, living with chosen family, like, write that stuff down, because the last thing you want, if you don't have a relationship with your family, or even if you do, but you have a relationship with these other people that's stronger to you, like, you need to write that down on paper, because the people that aren't involved in your life, who are your blood family, can come in, swoop in, and do whatever they want, because they're the ones that are legally in charge, unless you've set that up. And that's not go out and pay for a trust and pay for a will per se. That's, you can get stuff written down that just says, this person is in charge when I die, and they know exactly what I want. And as long as that is on paper, and if you need to get it notarized, go to your bank, they do it for free. And make sure that those papers are where people can find them when and if something does happen to you. Because like I read that book, Stone Butch Blues, a long time ago. And the only thing I really remember from that book is a friend of theirs who was very masculine presenting. I don't know if the person was trans, but they died. Their parents came in because there was no blood family. And they like dressed this person in a dress and put them in the casket. And all their friends were just mortified, because they were like, that's not who that was. But their family came in and they're like, this is our little girl. This is how we remember her. And that has stuck with me. That is the only thing I remember from that book. There's other stuff a little bit, but that is the biggest thing from that book. That was my takeaway. And it was like, I do not want people that are not who I want to be in charge of me, having the right to say what happens to me.
That is one of my fears. That is one of my fears. I have mine in writing, so that's to encourage folks to actually do that. That is one of my fears. And if my mom listens to this episode, sorry, Mom. My brothers listen to this episode, sorry, brothers. But in that, It specifically says my mom and my brothers cannot make no decisions for me or my body.
Yeah.
Period. And that's just it. They can't make a decision on whether to pull a plug on me, life support, or anything. I want my son. That's the number one person to be able to make that decision for me. And he's not my blood child, but that is the child who I raise, and I call him my son, and legally he's my son, and he calls me dad, and that's it. I want him to be able to make a decision. And even with my possessions, whether it's money or life insurance, whatever, it does not go to my family whatsoever, because I just feel like they would not respect me. And I always joke and say, if they get possession of my body and put a dress on me, I swear to God, I'm just going to roll off that fucking table.
Right,
so I'll be one of the people you talking to, Patrick. I'm going to talk back to you. I'm going to say, get this fucking dress off me, Patrick. But yeah, like I just, so I think that is very important as trans folks to be very specific about we can speak for ourselves in life, when in death we can't do that. And so make sure it's already spoken for.
And some people can be like, oh, I'm dead, I don't care. But it's just like, you work so hard to be seen for who you are. You should be seen. Your death certificate should reflect that. You should be seen for who you are in death as well, and respected.
Absolutely.
And I have not, I've taken care of a couple trans feminine presenting folks, whose like I didn't know, like, initially I just hear a name, I'm talking to family, and then, then I have this person out, and you can just, some people were like maybe part-time, their eyebrows were done. I don't know if they were, dressing for, performance or if they part-time lived in a female presenting body, but I've had a few female presenting folks. I've had family members who I try to be very respectful of. I try to make sure they know I hear you, I'm respecting you. Even if I'm sitting in a room where family is not respecting that person as they're talking, I'm making sure like, you're the person in charge, you're the person I'm talking to, and I'm respecting your pronouns. And sometimes I'll come out, like if it's just us later, like if I feel like I want to make sure they know I'm paying attention, like I may come out to them. But I have not had anybody to this point that has, that were obviously transgender, because they're there with no clothes on. And then but I had paperwork that said something else. I haven't had just a few folks, but mostly it's been family that have the trans members in their family. But I want to make sure that they are respected in life and in death, whether it's the family, whether it's the decedent.
Yes, that's very important. I want to be represented right in both aspects, right? The way I live my life, I want for folks to remember me in death. If you walk past my casket, maybe you don't know me, and I want you to be like, who is that lady, that rough looking lady with the beard? Because I got on the fucking dress. No.
Right. Exactly.
Do me right. Patrick, thank you so much for being a guest. So this is a part of the show where I like to ask my guest a random question. This list is forever growing. I now have 48 questions. If you've listened to the show previously, you know how this goes. So just pick a number between 1 and 48 and I'll read you that question. But the caveat to this is this season, I want you to take one and leave one. So I want you to answer a question, but then leave one for a future guest to answer.
Okay. I'm going to say 35.
Number 35 says, this is kind of perfect, and it kind of goes along with your career a little bit. It says, what are 3 words you would use to describe yourself?
It's so funny. I just went to an event where they had to do this and I was like, oh man, you're making me think hard. Compassionate, adventurous, sometimes boring.
Boring.
Boring, yeah.
Oh,
To go to bed at 8:00. I don't like to be out late.
That's not boring. That's just you're responsible. You care about your body. You just say you work out. So a working out body needs rest. So that's just responsible. I love that. Reason why I say that kind of goes with your career a little bit, because if you think about what folks with the last little remembrance of a person, right? You get up at a funeral, you say, you'll go to do your 3 minutes of like, people say these words of what they remember of that person. So people will say Patrick is adventurous, boring, and what was the other one you said?
Compassionate.
Compassionate. I love that. So your job now is to just leave one for a future guest.
I would say, I guess kind of along what we were talking about, like, what have you done to prepare for your death?
Wow. That gave me goosebumps, actually. It did, because it's inevitable, right? One day we're just gonna be on that other side.
Because I do it every day doesn't mean I'm comfortable with it either. I'm kind of there with you too. Like I'm not. I know it's gonna happen. I see how quickly, but not comfortable with it.
Yeah. So are you prepared?
Somewhat. We have designated a couple different folks, like if something, because we travel a lot, and so I'm like, if something happens to both of us, we've both designated friends to kind of go through those things, like if I'm in the hospital or if I die, blah, blah. But one of those friends I haven't spoken to in a really long time, so I probably need to change that to somebody else. We go back and forth. My husband and I both have gone back and forth of like, I know I don't want to be embalmed. Even though I'm an embalmer, I don't want to be embalmed because I don't feel like I don't need to be preserved. But we looked into composting and natural burial. So I'm kind of between those two of like, just kind of put me in something like a wicker casket or something and bury me. But then the thing is, I'm not a big fan of taking up that space forever. So there's also a thing called aquamation, where it's like a water-based cremation. So it's a little bit more green than it, because they use food grade lye to speed up the natural decomposition process. So it's kind of between those: natural burial, aquamation, and composting. And if I did natural burial, it would be at a natural burial ground where, like, ultimately after so long, somebody else can be buried on top of you. So you're not taking up as much space.
I love that, Patrick. Actually, I never really thought about that until some years ago. A friend mentioned that to me, of like, he wanted to be cremated because he don't want to take up space. And I just never thought about it that way, because I was raised where my mother's like, I don't want to be cremated. Nobody should be cremated, right? And so I never thought about it that way. But then as he provoked that thought in my mind, I'm like, that's true, because technically we're here now, right? But in 100 years, nobody's going to know who you are in that plot. Nobody's going to be coming to visit you. Yeah. Right. So you taking up space. And I always wonder, like, after 100 years or so, what they do with that ground. Is people really still there, or do they get, it's like, I always worry about that.
There's a movement too, like, I don't know where they got this 50 years from, but there's kind of this movement of, like, after 50 years, like, these graves can be resold and other people can use them. Which, yeah, makes sense, because we're going to run out of space. We barely have space for people to live, let alone we need more space for people to die. And same, my family's very traditional funeral, no cremation. My mom is like, no cremation.
Yeah. I personally want to be cremated. I would rather have my loved ones that love me, that are here, to enjoy my ashes, and then whatever else after they're gone, I don't know, right? Or spread me somewhere or whatever. I'd rather do that. Yeah.
Someplace you like.
Yeah. Don't spend $1 million on the casket for me. Just, So, yeah.
Visibility equals possibility. We them boys. Them boys. Amplifying, transmitting color voices. Yeah, we here making noise. Making noise. Them boys. Them boys.